You know what I've been thinking or noticing lately? No matter where I go or who I talk to, I keep hearing the same thing. People are tired, not lazy, not entitled, not unwilling to work, just tired. And before somebody says every generation has struggled, I understand that. That's true. But something feels different right now. It feels like a lot of people are carrying a weight they were never prepared to carry. Have you noticed it too? Maybe it's your friend who suddenly stopped going out. Maybe it's a family member who's working two jobs and still struggling to make ends meet. Maybe it's a classmate who looks fine on the outside, but quietly wondering how they're going to pay for school. Maybe it's a coworker whose hours got cut. Maybe it's somebody who can't afford to move out. Maybe it's somebody who can't afford to stay where they are. Or maybe it's you. Maybe you're working hard. Maybe you're going to school. Maybe you're taking care of your family. Maybe you're doing everything people told you to do. And yet it still feels like you're barely keeping your head above water. I think that's why so many people feel frustrated right now because we're told that if we work hard enough, things will eventually work out. But for a lot of people, that's not what they're experiencing. The numbers tell a different story. More than half of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck. Nearly half of millennials and Gen Z say they're worried about their long-term financial future. Housing costs continue to rise. Education costs continue to rise. Healthcare costs continue to rise. Meanwhile, wages often struggle to keep up. And when you put all of that together, it's not uncommon to understand why people feel overwhelmed. I hear people talk about it all the time. They're worried about rent. They're worried about groceries. They're worried about debt. They're worried about finding a decent paying job. They're worried about keeping the job they already have. They're worried about their future. And after a while, that kind of pressure starts affecting more than just your bank account. It affects your mental health. It affects your relationships. It affects your confidence. It affects how you see yourself. Because when you're constantly struggling, it's easy to start believing that you're the problem. It's easy to think you failed. But what if that's not the whole story? What if some of the challenges we're facing aren't simply individual failures? What if they're signs that some of the systems we depend on are no longer working the way they should? Now, let me be clear. Personal responsibility matters. Working hard matters. Making smart decisions matters. But we also have to be honest enough to acknowledge the reality. You can't budget your way out of every problem. You can't work your way out of every problem. You can't positive think your way out of every problem. Sometimes people are doing everything they can and they're still struggling. And if that's happening to millions of people, maybe we need to stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what's happening around. So, where do we go from here? I don't think the answer is giving up. I don't think the answer is blaming each other. And I definitely don't think the answer is pretending that everything is fine when clearly it's not. I think it starts with honesty, honesty about what we're experiencing, Honesty about what we're struggling with, honesty about what needs to change. I think it starts with community, checking on people, sharing opportunity, helping people make connection, supporting one another when we can. I think it starts with listening, not just waiting for our turn to speak, but actually listening. Because some of the best solutions come from people who are living these problems every single day. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the solution isn't going to come from one person. Maybe it's not going to come from one politician. Maybe it won't come from one institution. Maybe real change starts when ordinary people start having honest conversations and refusing to ignore what's happening around them. That's why I wanted to have this conversation today. Not because I have all the answers. I don't. But because I know I'm not the only one seeing this. And I know I'm not the only one asking questions. So let me ask you, what are you seeing? What are people in your community struggling with? What solution do you think we should be talking about? Because if we're serious about fixing what's broken, we have to start talking to each other, not at each other, to each other. I'm Arion Ford, and this is System Failure.